Hello. I was going to write about this, but I'm going to speak about it instead. The link between grief and depression. I read an article yesterday by Johann Hari, and he was talking about how in the 1970s psychiatrists in the States developed this thing called the grief exception, which in their checklist of symptoms of people who are suffering from depression, they noticed that, oh, they're the same as people who are grieving, and so the grief exception became an exception for people who had lost someone in the last year to not be prescribed drugs. And that story really resonated to me because I was told when Rock died that oh, go to the doctors, you need something to help you, to give you a bit of a lift kind of thing. And I was so clear in me that I'm not depressed. I don't need drugs to support me through this. I really don't. It was so clear. It was really annoying hearing this. And at the same time, I can really resonate all of the things that people who are depressed feel, I've felt as well. So I totally get how confusing it is for people to respond to. And maybe what I was really responding to is not the category of being labelled depressed or labelled grieving or whatever, but actually I don't want drugs. The drugs aren't the solution to what I'm feeling. They're certainly not what I'm needing. What I'm needing is space for my grief. And drugs aren't going to do that. They're just going to shut it down even more. And Johann Hari says how depression is a form of grief. He ends up saying it is a form of grief. Grief for yourself and grief for the culture that's going so disastrously wrong around us. He also says something like, if you're depressed, they're not parts of you that are wrong or broken. You have unmet needs. And hearing that phrase is a phrase that I use a lot in MVC about feelings of anger and sadness and fear, despair, all point to needs not being met. And it helps us to look at the bigger picture of our lives and not just these mechanical parts like serotonin levels in your brain. And MVC really helps to encourage and foster a kind of paradigm where we are basing our actions on needs and trying to serve needs, trying to serve life through noticing needs and responding to them. And even that acknowledgement that I have needs alongside everyone else can be a huge breakthrough and healing to, if you've been told a lot in your past that your needs don't matter. In family and in society, like our needs aren't being acknowledged as mattering. It could be real breakthrough and really supportive just to acknowledge needs, how needs exist within us and how they live within us. And also within the paradigm that MVC brings is that feelings point to unmet needs. So we can go into our feelings and through them discover what the unmet needs are, because most of the time we don't know what's wrong. With a cacophony of time, pressure, living that we have, social media and everything, it's like we don't have the space to kind of check into what we're needing. And often with the MVC, there's a list of needs that Marshall Rosenberg developed, including needs for connection, for communication, needs for community, needs for love, for support, for touch. And just seeing them on that list, it really validates them, that you're not wrong for needing support. It's a human need. We can't, if we don't have it, we suffer. And grief is on that list. Mourning is on that list. If we don't have mourning, we suffer. And I think it was Francis Weller who said that, or it might have been Martine Prechtel, I'm not sure, that grief is unmetabolized rage. I think it's Martine Prechtel. But Francis Weller's work around the 5 gateways of grief is really supportive, because he outlines five different areas of grief. One, which is the only one that's allowed, but for a short period of time, is when someone dies. The second is parts of ourselves that have never been loved, or that we've had to hide because they're not socially acceptable, like our anger or our dreaminess, or our kind of real deep sensitivity, whatever, the parts of us that have never known love from others or from ourselves. Third one is things that we came into this world expecting, like a community to live in, like a tribe kind of thing, like connection to nature on a daily basis, like support when raising children, that it's a community, is all hands are there to bring up children, and it's not just the responsibility of 2 people or one person, in the case of single parents having to do it on their own. The 4th gateway of grief that Francis Weller describes is, I've just forgotten it, the sorrows of the world. How all of the sadnesses, the despair in the world, war, poverty, climate change. And the 5th one is ancestral grief. So grief from generations behind us, and grief for generations to come as well. So Francis Weller's talking about grief, but I find this hugely supportive for understanding depression as well, because as a cause for depression, all of these are there. And it also broadens out this any tendency to look at unmet needs as something that we need to respond to as individuals. You've got these unmet needs in our culture. It's like, so what are you going to do to meet them? That's a real individual, in an individualist culture. That's the pressure, the more pressure that comes on top of us. When I have a sense that the symptoms of depression and grief are based on a lack of therapeutic structures to allow us to get connected to what the unmet needs are in the first place. We have no space to kind of explore and understand what these unmet needs are. We don't even have this understanding of needs in our culture. We don't get taught this at schools. But also symptoms of depression and grief are also connected to a lack of community structures for grieving, a lack of community structures for resting together, for eating together, for fun and play together, for doing things collectively to counteract the isolation that exists. And finally, and Johann Hari also talks about this, the lack of cooperative structures to counteract the real lack of autonomy and control that we have in our working lives, the sense of meaningless and purposelessness that we have in our working lives. So these are the areas that we need to be operating on, acknowledging needs, understanding them, and then working cooperatively to create new structures for our communities and for our working lives. So that's it, that's what I have to say. It's a little bit quicker writing. Although I have been faffing around for 10 minutes trying to set up the phone in the right place. But anyway, I hope you enjoy. Bye for now.